Most people think accidents are loud. Explosions, screaming, twisted metal flying everywhere. But by the time I get there, it's already quiet. Too quiet. Just the ticking of cooling engines and the soft hiss of steam drifting into the night air. That's my part of the job. I come when the story's already over. When the police tape is coming down, the coroner's van is pulled away, and all that's left is what won't move on its own. I've been towing wrecks for over 20 years, and I work both sides of the county line. Different departments, same back roads. Most deputies know my truck before they know my name. That night, the call came just before 3 in the morning. Single vehicle in the ditch on County Road 117, right near the county marker. Fog had rolled in thick, the kind that swallows sound and turns headlights into dull white smears. The car was wrapped around a pine tree so hard the hood had folded up like paper. No blood left, no personal items scattered, just broken glass and the faint smell of antifreeze. The deputy stood nearby, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes red from the cold and the long night. "One car?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "That's all we found," he said. But the road told a different story. 2 sets of tire marks cut through the damp pavement. One swerved off into the ditch. The other stayed straight, wide and deep, disappearing into the fog like it had never existed. I pointed them out. "Probably clipped and ran," the deputy said. "Happens more than you'd think." Maybe. But these weren't skinny commuter tires. These were wide, aggressive tracks, the kind you see on muscle cars. And just before the impact point, there were dark streaks that didn't look like braking. They looked like acceleration. Still, I did my job. Hooked the chains, winched the wreck, hauled it off the road. And I told myself not to think about it. That's what you learn to do in this line of work. Take the metal, leave the rest behind. A few weeks later, I was back on that same stretch of road, this time called out by the sheriff's department on the other side of the county line. Another late-night crash. Another young woman driving alone. Another car shoved off the road and into the trees. And again, no second vehicle. I started noticing how often my calls were pulling me back to that mile of asphalt. Always late, always fog. Always after midnight, when traffic thins out and the road feels like it belongs to whoever happens to be driving it. Different deputies, different badges, same questions. No witnesses? None that stuck around? Any sign of another car? Just tire marks. And every time, those tire marks were the same. Wide tread, heavy acceleration, vanishing clean into the dark. I finally mentioned it to one of the older deputies I'd known for years. He stared at the road for a long moment before answering. "Not our county most nights," he said. "Paperwork doesn't cross that line easy, but yeah, it's been weird." That was when it clicked. Both departments were dealing with the same thing. They just weren't putting the pieces together. Each side only saw half the pattern. All the wrecks stayed within about a mile on either side of the county line, not crossing it, not moving deeper into either jurisdiction, just circling that same stretch like it was stuck on repeat. It started to feel less like bad luck and more like something choosing that road. What finally connected it for me wasn't something I saw on the road. It was something I remembered from years back, from when I still read the local paper instead of skimming headlines on my phone between calls. There had been a big story once, big for our area anyway. A young man killed late at night on County Road 117. Head-on collision. They printed his photo on the front page. High school graduation picture, awkward smile, Camaro just barely visible behind him in the driveway. I remembered thinking how young he looked. Younger than most of the bodies I hauled even back then. I went digging through the paper's online archive after my shift ended, sitting at my kitchen table while the sun came up, coffee going cold beside me. Same stretch of road, same mile near the county line. The article said the other driver was a woman in her early 20s. She crossed into his lane. She survived. No charges filed. They said there was no proof she was drunk, no proof she was distracted. Just fog, darkness, and a moment that couldn't be taken back. But what stuck with me was buried halfway down the page, in a quote from a farmer whose property backed up to the road. He said he heard the crash and ran outside thinking someone had hit a deer. When he reached the fence line, he said the Camaro was already burning, and the engine was still screaming, revving like the driver was trying to pull free even after the front end was crushed. That detail wouldn't leave me alone, because the new wrecks all had the same marks. Acceleration, not braking, not swerving, like someone was still trying to outrun something that was already on top of them. I started pulling reports from my own call logs, dates, times, locations. Then I compared them to the newspaper story. Same season, same weather patterns, same hour of the night. It felt less like a series of accidents and more like a scene being replayed over and over with different people dropped into the same roles. Not punishment. Practice. Like whatever was left of that Camaro driver wasn't looking for revenge on a person anymore. It was just trapped in the moment where everything went wrong. Still flooring the gas, still trying to get past the other car before it was too late. And every time, only one vehicle stayed behind. The first time I saw it for myself, I wasn't even supposed to be there yet. Dispatch called it in as a possible disabled vehicle. No confirmation of injuries, just someone who'd driven past and seen hazard lights blinking through the fog. When I pulled up, the car was already half off the shoulder, front end smashed in like it had kissed a guardrail too hard. Steam drifted up from under the hood, rolling through the headlights in slow, ghostly waves. No police, no ambulance. Just me, the wreck, and that stretch of road that had started to feel wrong even in daylight. I shut off my engine and stepped out, listening. The fog swallowed everything. No insects, no distant traffic, just the soft ticking of cooling metal and the faint hiss of steam. That's when I noticed the tire marks. Not just where the car had left the road, but looping around it, wide arcs pressed into the damp pavement, like something had circled the wreck more than once before pulling away. Fresh rubber, still dark, still warm. I reached back into my cab for the flashlight when my radio crackled to life. Not dispatch, not voices, just the sound of an engine revving, low and steady, bleeding through the static like someone had left a mic open near an idling car. My first thought was interference. Maybe another tow truck, maybe a trucker on the wrong frequency. But the sound didn't cut in and out like interference usually does. It just stayed, constant, watching. I turned slowly and checked my mirrors. 2 headlights hovered in the fog behind me, barely 20 yards back, low to the ground, wide apart. The faint outline of a long hood barely visible between them. It wasn't parked on the shoulder. It was sitting in the lane, exactly where a car would be if it were waiting for traffic to clear. Waiting for me. I stood there, hand still wrapped around my flashlight, heart thudding so loud I was sure it could hear me. The engine sound on the radio matched the idle I could almost feel in the air, a vibration that seemed to settle into my chest instead of my ears. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the headlights brightened slightly, like the driver had tapped the gas. I flinched and looked back toward the wreck, half expecting to see the car move. When I turned around again, the headlights were gone. No sound, no movement. Just fog and empty road. The police arrived less than a minute later, They searched the shoulder, checked the trees, drove a short way up and down the road. No second vehicle, no witnesses, nothing. But the tire marks were still there, and they hadn't cooled at all. After that night, I couldn't look at those wrecks the same way anymore. It wasn't just something happening on that road. It was something working that road, following the same script every time. I started keeping notes in a little spiral notebook I kept in my glove box. Nothing official, just dates, times, weather, mile markers. I'd jot them down while waiting for paperwork or sitting at red lights, trying not to look like someone who was getting too obsessed with his own job. Fog showed up in almost every entry. So did the same narrow window of time between midnight and 3 in the morning. And every crash sat within that same mile on either side of the county line, like the road itself had invisible boundaries. But what really stood out were the tracks. Every scene had acceleration marks leading straight into the impact. Not long skid trails, no sign of someone trying to stop, just dark rubber burned into the asphalt like the driver had floored it at the worst possible moment. I kept thinking about the Camaro driver, about how that farmer said the engine kept screaming even after the car was already burning. I tried to picture that moment. Trapped, hurt, confused, still pushing the gas because the body hadn't caught up with what the brain already knew. And I started to wonder if whatever was left of him didn't understand that the crash was over. Maybe, in his mind, he was still on that road, still racing the headlights coming at him, still trying to clear the lane before it was too late. That would explain why the crashes felt so similar, why the other car never stayed behind, why the damage always looked like one vehicle had been forced into a losing move. It wasn't looking for victims. It was trying to finish a race that had already ended. And anyone who happened to be driving through that mile of road at the wrong time became part of it. That thought scared me more than the idea of some angry, vengeful ghost. This wasn't rage. This was momentum. Something stuck in motion, repeating the same mistake because it didn't know how to do anything else. And if that was true, then it wasn't going to stop on its own. Not as long as there were roads to drive and people to fill the empty seat across from it. The call came in a little after 2 in the morning. Not a confirmed crash, just a report of debris on the road and someone swearing they'd seen sparks in the fog. Dispatch asked if I could swing by and take a look before they tied up a deputy. I told myself it was routine. I told myself I was just being jumpy after a long month of bad calls and too little sleep. But when I reached that mile of road, my gut dropped. There was no wreck, no broken glass, no car in the ditch, just fresh skid marks cutting across the pavement. And when I pulled onto the shoulder to look closer, I saw something that made my hands go numb on the wheel. My own tire tracks were already in the dirt. Same width, same tread pattern, same shallow groove from where my back axle always rides a little heavier on the right side. It looked like I'd been there earlier, like I'd already checked this scene and just didn't remember doing it. I was leaning out the door, trying to make sense of that when my radio crackled. At first, I thought it was interference again. Then the sound sharpened into something I couldn't mistake. An engine revving. Deep, loud, close. I snapped upright and looked in the mirror. Headlights filled the back window, blinding white through the fog, close enough that I could see the curved edge of the hood and the reflection of my own brake lights in its paint. I slammed the door and hit the gas. My truck surged forward, diesel roaring, tires spitting gravel as I shot back onto the road. The Camaro stayed right where it was, not gaining, not falling back, just locked behind me, perfectly centered in my lane, like it was pushing me without ever touching me. My radio screamed with static and engine noise layered together, like the sound was coming from inside my cab instead of outside it. I tried to change lanes. The headlights shifted with me. I tried to slow down. They closed the gap until I could feel the vibration of its engine through my seat. It wasn't chasing me. It was herding me. The county line marker flashed past in my headlights, and I didn't even remember deciding to head that direction. My hands were moving on their own, following the road like it had already chosen where this was going. The moment my tires crossed that line, the pressure vanished. No headlights, no engine, no static. Just my truck coasting too fast into silence. I pulled over and sat there shaking, knuckles locked around the steering wheel, waiting for the sound to come back. It didn't. But I knew that didn't mean it was gone. I didn't report what happened that night, not the headlights, not the engine, not the way the pressure vanished the second I crossed the county line. I told dispatch I'd found nothing and went home, trying to convince myself that exhaustion and fog had done strange things to my head. But the road didn't let me forget. By late morning, I was already getting calls from deputies asking if I'd been near County Road 117 overnight. There'd been another fatal crash. Same stretch, same damage, same missing second vehicle. A young woman driving home from a late shift wrapped around a tree just like all the others. And this time, there were tow truck tracks near the scene. Not just near the shoulder, right up to the edge of the ditch. Then gone. Like the truck had backed away and disappeared. Tracks that matched my rig. Same tread, same uneven axle pattern, same shallow dip where my right rear tire always rides low. The deputies asked if I'd been there earlier and forgotten to log the call. One of them joked that maybe I'd started working in my sleep. I laughed with them because that was easier than explaining why my hands were shaking. After that, things changed. Every time a wreck happened on that mile of road, someone would glance at me a little longer than they used to, ask if I'd seen anything strange, ask if my radio had been acting up again, ask if I remembered exactly where I'd been that night. I started taking longer routes home, avoiding that stretch whenever I could. But towing doesn't work like that. Calls come where they come, and eventually, you go where you're sent. Sometimes, when I'm driving through fog now, my radio crackles with engine noise that cuts out the second I touch the volume knob. Sometimes when I stop at a scene, I find tire marks already there that look a little too familiar. And sometimes, when I check my mirrors, I think I see headlights that vanish when I blink. I still tow wrecks, still clean up after the worst nights of other people's lives, still work that county line because somebody has to. But now I know the road remembers more than the crash. It remembers who comes after. And sooner or later, it always wants another run. If you're still with me, take a second before you scroll away and think about the roads you drive every night. The ones you don't even notice anymore. The stretches where the fog gets thicker, the radio gets quieter, and you swear the headlights behind you stay a little too close. Because stories like this don't always start with monsters or warnings. Sometimes they start with ordinary jobs and people who show up after everyone else has already left. If you enjoy slow burn horror like this, stories about night shifts, forgotten roads, and the places where something still remembers what happened, make sure you subscribe to Campfire Horror Stories And turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. And if you've ever driven a road that felt wrong, if you've ever seen something in your mirror that wasn't there when you looked again, drop a comment and tell me about it. Because the scariest part of stories like this is knowing they only work if someone keeps driving the road. Good night, and drive safe.